So I believe this is Atlas's first session with the long target. He does know how to follow a target already, but this is a new thing for him. So you can tell by his body language that he's a little bit worried about it, a little bit interested. Like he was kind of arching his neck. He's got both of his ears pointed down. He's looking down toward the end of it. And then when he does end up actually touching it, kind of flinches a little bit, scares himself just a bit. I should have probably fed and reinforced as he was looking at it and not made him touch it. Like, even though it's a target and he understands what a target is, um, just seeing those body language signs should have told me, like, oh, he's a little bit worried about it. I should just reinforce him being near it, and then just giving him a couple more tries before I actually had him touch it. He does come back okay and still want to touch it. So he's kind of just touching the stick there. So he's just kind of investigating. I'm really looking for him to touch down at the end. So where the little blue pool noodle is, that's where I want him to touch. That's where I want him to get all of his reinforcement. So there he kind of goes toward it. There I'm going to click and then feed. So if he was still kind of a little bit worried about the situation, I would have just clicked and fed as he was going toward the pool noodle part, the blue part, because I want him to start associating, like, that's where you're supposed to go. That's where the reinforcement is at. So again, he's touching that blue noodle part. And it's important that he touches that part because I want this target to create the distance. That's why it's so long. So I can get him moving around me, lunging around me, and then get him in that correct position where I can reinforce him, and then reinforce him consistently, build up those cues, and then he'll do that on his own. And he actually picks this up really quickly, and you'll kind of see that process here. So that's why I liked using the long target. Both my Mustangs really picked this up very quickly, and we were right into completely lunging at Liberty. So I'm just, again, a few more times reinforcing him for touching the end of the target. There, like he's reaching for it before I even pick it up. So this is looking pretty good. He's leaning forward to touch it. Like I want him first to really want to touch it. Then I'm going to start moving it forward, and I want to reinforce him following it. So that's the next thing. And probably a little bit in this video, I'll reinforce him for touching it. Like he'll walk forward to it and touch it as I'm moving it. I gotta be careful with that. When this was filmed, I didn't know exactly as much as I do now. And you don't want a horse to feel like they have to touch the target and that they have to chase it. And that's where you get a lot of like ears back, pinned ears, like just chasing after it, and that the horse isn't really having fun. I don't want them to have to chase it. And how you don't do that is you reinforce them just following it. Reinforce a certain distance where that they maintain in front of or behind the target. So like if I put the target and start to move it and the horse is like a foot away from it or 6 inches or whatever, let's say I'm moving it and he's about a foot away from it, I reinforce him when he's that certain distance and he's moving forward. So I want to create that forward, but I don't want him to feel like he has to chase it, because in order to get that forward movement, like he can never really touch it, and that's where that frustration and that's where that chasing comes in. So you do have to be careful with that. So I'm just gonna have it come forward, and he's coming forward to touch it. So here, like I probably would have just, if I was redoing this video, started moving the target forward and reinforcing him for just following it and not necessarily touching. But he does want to touch it, so he is interested in it. So we do have that going. I just want to start having him move forward and not feeling like he has to chase it. Good. So I should probably click there a little bit earlier and not worry about him necessarily touching it, because I do want to focus more on that movement and not the touch. I mean, even though I didn't do this lesson perfect, it did work. Like, I did teach him that. He might have his ears pinned a little bit. Like, I definitely could have done it better. I like how his ears are here. I should click here before he touches it. But with Atlas, like, he didn't really have that tendency. Like, Castor really has that tendency a bit more. So with Atlas, he didn't really have that as much. So he was a little bit more forgiving, even though it wasn't perfect. A horse like Castor wasn't as much. He likes to chase things. Like, he's kind of that kind of horse. But I don't want him to feel frustrated either, though. So I should click him about a little bit earlier, just like a second or two earlier, where he's got his attention on the target and he's moving toward it. But this is looking nice so far. I want to show it to him on both sides, make sure that he can walk toward it both directions and kind of gets the idea and really wants to touch that target. But yeah, with a horse more like Castor, you want to be definitely careful. Like, Atlas is a bit more forgiving in that sense. This is the same kind of thing with leading. Castor feels like he's not going to get reinforced, so then you get the pinned ears and they're kind of chasing after you, which you don't want. Atlas really didn't do that. And so I think, especially in the beginning when I was experimenting a lot with positive reinforcement, what I was doing was working with Atlas. So I was like, oh, it's working with Atlas, I'm doing it right. And then I would get to Castor and I would have these other behaviors. So I just didn't know because Atlas was a little bit easier horse in that regard. So I should be clicking just a second earlier where he had his ears up and he was moving his feet toward the target. So I've already got this part down. Like he's already totally fine with touching it. He wants to touch it. So I need to be aware of that. See, when I picked it up, his head kind of came up, his ears stretched. I got to be careful of that because I do want to end up bringing that target up vertically. And I'm just going to do it slowly so that I don't scare him because it does look a little bit scarier that way. So see, he's a little confused. There, I should click him here where he's moving toward but doesn't necessarily touch it. So just a little bit of a problem-solving video to kind of go back and critique.